Now in the Bible, there was a book called Judges. And what was happening at this moment is, you know Moses, and you will have heard of Joshua, who leads people into the promised land. Now what Joshua said to the Israelites was that they needed to get rid of all the false gods, and that these guys, judges, men and women called by God to lead Israel after Joshua died, their job was to get rid of all of the enemies and all of the false gods. But what happened in this book of Judges is some of the judges were pretty terrible, and they didn't follow what God asked them to do. They made the Israelites worship other gods, and it led to the Israelites being destroyed and living lives that God just did not want for them. This was a cycle over and over and over again, and this is what the book of Judges was about. God raising up these amazing people to lead Israel to victory, only for them to go round again in the same cycle. Now what happens in this story, we're looking at a guy called Gideon, is the Israelites cry out after years and years of peace. They then fall back into their old ways, worshipping these other gods. And they cry out, and in steps this angel of the Lord, shows up in the middle of nowhere to a man called Gideon. Now this guy Gideon, what he was doing at this point was he was hiding. He was actually hiding from the evil people, the Midianites, who wanted to destroy Israel. God shows up and says, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." And Gideon says, "I am weak. My clan's the weakest in the whole tribe, and I'm the weakest in my family." He says, "I'm nothing. How then, God, can you ask me to do something for you?" And what happens is God says that, "Go, lead against the Midianites. I will be with you." Gideon thinks he's nothing, he's worthless. But God says, "Anyway, I'll be with you, and you're a mighty warrior." So God asks Gideon to do a couple of things. The first thing he says is get rid of the false gods. He says get rid of an altar to a false god, and the people don't like this. They actually, whenever Gideon tore this down, they wanted Gideon dead. But Gideon did it anyway, despite the opposition, despite being afraid, he did it anyway. And then God leads Gideon to build an army against the evil Midianites. See, God wanted to show that he's the one who brings victory. So what the Midianites had about 135,000 people. And he gives Gideon an army of 32,000 against 135,000. Not great odds. But then what God does is he asks Gideon to step out in faith. And he says, "Tell anyone who's afraid in your army to go home." 32,000 becomes 10,000. And then again he says to Gideon, "I want to show you that I'm the one who's going to bring victory, not you." And he cuts Gideon's army down to 300 men against 135,000. What God does in this story with Gideon is he reassures Gideon, because Gideon was afraid quite a lot. He was afraid that God wasn't going to be able to do this. He reassured him with a dream that the enemy soldiers had. They had this dream that the Israelites would overtake them, would overthrow them. And what happens is exactly that. 300 men, they only had, get this, no weapons. They had a lamp and a horn. That's all they had to fight 135,000. But what happens is when they called out that it was for the name of God, the Midianites were so afraid and they killed each other because they were so confused. So Gideon led 300 people only against 135,000. They destroyed the Midianites who were oppressing Israel, and all they had to do was cry out for God, and they destroyed each other, and then they were able to kill the rest of them. You see, this story about Gideon, you may think, okay, this is interesting about God using only small things. Many, many times in this story, he was afraid. Many times he said, "God, I can't do this. I can't be your man to take out 135,000. The story of Gideon is that even if you're afraid, this will not stop God working in your life. It won't stop him loving you, even when you're afraid. What does God say to Gideon? "I will be with you." I want to encourage you, God can still use you even if you're afraid. You see, to follow the Lord, all you have to do is let go of what you think is best. Allow him to be in control. It is so much better when he's in control. When you trust the Lord in your life, he will accomplish more than you can ever imagine. Even if you have very little in your life and you think, "God, I only have this and I'm only good at this. I'm not good at this, but I only have this to give you." God doesn't need much to use it in your life and bless you all the time. So I encourage you, God calls you by what he sees in you. Remember he said to Gideon, "I'm with you, mighty warrior." And he says this to Gideon before Gideon's done anything, even when he was hiding. This story is a story to encourage you. Nothing is impossible in your life. So what's God asking you to do? When you listen to him and you trust him step by step, you will see what he's doing, and he will lead you into greater victory than you could ever do yourself. Because it's not about what you can do, it's about what God can do through you, even if you only have 300 men against 135,000. And this is the story of Gideon.